Welcome back, everyone. Let's go deeper into just learning a bit about the definition and the differences between project-based learning. So, essentially, the definition of project-based learning is an extended inquiry process structured around complex, authentic questions and carefully designed products and tasks. Problem-based learning is really focused on the process, while project-based learning is focused on the product and the solution to the problem. Differences between project-based and problem-based are not clear, and sometimes the definitions are used interchangeably. But just given my own personal experience designing PBLs, I would say that the product and solution to the problem is the one that seems to be the best solution, not best solution, but really the more intuitive approach to project-based learning. And the why. Why do we use project-based learning to begin with? Well, for students, it improves their understanding of concepts and theories because it's a bit more tangible. You're spending more time learning these concepts and theories. It does improve life skills, problem solving, collaboration. They have to learn how to manage their time, and they understand real-world applications to your project-based lesson. There's more improved responsibility, self-direction, communication, and creativity, which is something that we really value here in the Tile Lab. Students also have an improved understanding of learning and how to learn. I think one of the most important things that everyone should know is understanding how their brain learns. This concept of repetition and practice and sort of focus versus diffused modes of brain activity, which goes deeper into the neuroscience. But essentially, when it comes to the knowledge acquisition, typically we do need more research about knowledge acquisition. But just from personal experience and just being able to do these types of projects for almost 10 years now, I do know that this does stick to memory. I can think of a personal time in my own high school experience when I took woodshop class, and those projects that were very, very project-based oriented are still very vivid in my memory because of the process, the extended time, the scaffolded learning, and the product. It was great to have a physical product at the end of a project, and I still have these projects to this day, almost like 20-something years later. So project-based learning does have a value, and it does have impact, and even though our students might not realize it now, they will come back and understand that this has value. So, as a teacher, what exactly do these practices look like? Like, what are sort of the gold standard practices towards designing a PBL? How do I know that I'm doing it according to a rigorous and gold standard? Well, personally, I would say that you have to have designing and planning. So you are a teacher, but think of yourself more as a designer. Where you're designing the project, and of course you're planning the lesson, but it does feel more like a design approach. Definitely aligning to your standards, so we all understand where our standards lie, and we are obviously integrating it towards our standards, but alignment to our standards is key to keep within standard practice. There's a sense of building a culture, whether it's in your classroom, on your campus, in your community or city. There's always this element of like a culture building aspect to it. And in terms of just practical workflow, it manages activities. So teachers will manage the activities weekly, daily, looking at a detailed plan as to what's going on at what stage of your project. And of course, when you're in your lesson for that day or in that section or unit of your project-based learning assignment, you're scaffolding the learning. So we're just meeting the students where they're at, and just helping them sort of gradually go to the next theory or the next skill set that we want them to acquire. And there's a lot of assessment, both formative and quantitative. So formative would be like your exit tickets and building those there, and then engaging in coaching. And I just briefly sort of brushed the surface of it, but we'll go deeper in terms of just practices overall. What are some sample projects? Well, here's a few ideas that have been done out there and we've seen online. Imagine a group of engineering students developing a playground for a local elementary school. That could be one project idea. What about biology students? Testing water quality here in California and educating the public about improving water quality. Very, very relevant to what's happening today. Chemical engineering students or chemistry students can develop a plan to evaluate distillation practices and policies, as one school did in Texas. You can have research students conduct a needs assessment and evaluate a community-based organizations. So imagine collaborating with outside organizations towards meeting their needs as a project. Or college level. This doesn't only apply to K through 12, but what if we had college students developing plans to improve the PTA association or parent-teacher association? These are just a few, but the possibilities are far and wide. So what are the 8 essential design elements? What exactly are those things that I know that I can check off that are the essential elements towards a project? Here they are. The first one is just skills, key knowledge. The next one is challenging problems or questions. Third is sustained inquiry. Fourth is authenticity, student voice and choice, reflection, critique and revision, and public product. So as we move forward going into the individual components to this design element essential, I just want to briefly share my own, because I always like to use my own example of our current projects to kind of help connect the bridge. So right now in the Tile Lab, we're currently creating a narrative diorama or miniature world that tells a story. And so this is for our upcoming art show in March. And one of my personal goals or teaching goals was to create a gold standard rigorous project-based lesson with a public component that we can showcase publicly. This was the perfect opportunity. So essentially what the students are going to be creating is a miniature world in a 12 by 12 laser cut wood box. And in this world, a public audience is going to see something that they want to express in themselves, whether it's academically, whether it's spiritually, personally, emotionally. They get to create a world that makes a statement, and it has a sort of a dreamlike component. And so, when it comes to this project, we'll go specifically into what that sort of entails, but that's just a project that we're working on in the lab. And the driving question, or the sort of the essential question that I'm always reminding my students is, how do we materialize or manifest a psychological landscape? And that's the overall sort of driving question. So let's talk about like those 8 essential design elements towards a project, one by one. So key knowledge and understanding, what exactly does that really mean? Well, that applies to real-world experiences. So this is this project, for example, that we're working on here in the Tile Lab, applies to real-world experiences, right? They have to create a quality product that essentially helps them to express an opinion, an emotion, a sort of state of mind, as it were. And we all do that, and we all have different ways of sort of expressing that. But that is a real-world experience where we have to communicate with others in different ways that are meaningful to us. And so that is an application towards the real world for them. Key success skills. Well, 21st century skills are really, really important. We're moving into an exponentially, rapidly changing world, and the 4 C's that our students need to acquire are critical thinking. They need to be able to problem solve, they have to collaborate, and they have to have self-management on these projects, or just have these skills available to them in a rapidly changing world. So how do we craft the question? How do I craft a question in this project? Well, you heard me briefly mention that when we do create, or when I created my project, let's say, it was open-ended, meaning it's not something that you can Google to get an answer. So typically it has a how or a why in front of the question. So in our class, currently the project is, how do we materialize a psychological landscape? As much as students might want to Google that, there's no solid answer towards answering that. And so it's very open-ended, and that's the starting point when it comes to your project. Obviously, it should be engaging, so it has some personal connection to them. And it has to have some type of investigation or research ability. So whether it's my own project or this great example, which is how do you find the soul of a community and translate it into your design? I mean, that is a very open-ended question, but it allows some deep level of exploration and an investigation. The third one is sustained inquiry in our design elements. So this question that we're posing should have a long-term sort of workflow. It should have an element of reflection and analysis, and we should be able to identify resources for that. So, visiting a community center conducting lab work is something that you can do the entire semester. In my own project, we're constantly assessing our emotional state of mind, our psychological or academic or spiritual state, almost weekly, if not daily, to make sure that we are aligning to the vision of the project for our student, or for the student. The fourth one is authenticity. Is the project authentic? Is there a real world context to this? Is there real impact on their community? Again, with our own project, is there real world context? Absolutely, because we are impacted by our emotions, and our psychology, our spirituality is constantly impacted by the world around us. We don't exist in a vacuum, obviously. So people are going to say things to us, and we're going to react to those things, and we're going to process emotions differently in different circumstances or situations. And when it comes to impact on community, well, the fact that we're going to be showcasing this in an art show has real impact, because what someone feels or wants to say about a certain subject can directly impact another person in their emotion or in their mindset. And that is a huge impact on community when we do the art show and display it in March. It has to have a real issue that matters to students. So this kind of lends itself to number 5, which is voice and choice. If it's a real issue that matters to students, then they're going to choose it because of that reason. And typically I find that that's always the case. They choose because it's because this issue matters to them. And when they have a voice, or student voice and choice, then they have a sense of ownership, and it's more pulling than it is pushing them to do the work. So they're invested, they are taking ownership, and they are dedicated to finding a solution to this open-ended problem. And they're working together in groups to sort of collaborate, whether it's on personal analysis or technical analysis, because there is a construction component in creating your product. But students select, and they have choice, and they can go about it in their own and unique way. The sixth design element for a project-based learning assignment is reflection. So what are your students learning? Do they have an opportunity to sort of reflect on what they're learning up to this point? And how are they learning it? I always find that it almost seems like when you go too deep into a project, not too deep, but when you go deep into a project, you have to have moments where you have to resurface and sort of check in and reflect on where we are in this process. Because sometimes students will have so much activity going on that it's hard for them to sort of reflect and just sort of see the bigger picture in the project. And ultimately the impact of what students are learning before, during, and after. That's important. I think it's important to have students understand, we didn't know this before, and here we are now. Isn't this great how we're learning all this? And look what we've accomplished at the end. We've learned so much. And just having an opportunity for either to ask that openly in a class discussion, or have it on a Google form for reflection, whatever the format that is ideal to your class, reflection is important. Critique and revision is that peer feedback. Students receive feedback on their projects, their drafts, ideas, final products. And I've seen this work both ways. I've seen it work between students and one-on-one with teacher interaction during a formative assessment session. So critique and revision is important. It's not criticism, and sometimes it's important for students to just be told, we're not here to criticize you, because we're not here to discourage you, but we're here to encourage you. Look at the thing that is working very well, and what we can do to maybe make it a little better. And so just that understanding that critique is not that a critique is to encourage and not discourage. We're not here to criticize the project, but we're here to critique it or encourage you to develop this further is important, at least from what I've seen in my own experience. And then the last one is a public product. So is it a poster? And are we displaying with other students and administrators? Are we showcasing this learning experience within our community, whether it's in the classroom, in the department, or to the school, or even the community? Whatever it is, the public component is what sort of increases the expectation and puts students in this mindset of, I have to really dedicate myself towards solving this problem, because the public product is sort of like an expectation, a high expectation for the student. And when they have ownership and they know that someone's coming in to sort of see their work, it really brings them to a higher level of focus and display. And back again to my own project, for the art show, I mean, if we're going to invite 10,000 potential alumni and guests, and students understand that this will be publicly displayed to that great of an audience, then absolutely they're going to focus in a much more higher expectation and perform at a higher level too. So just to recap, the 8 essential project design elements are really important, and they sort of lend themselves to each other. But just as an understanding, we have key knowledge and understanding. What do we want our students to know? What is the problem? What is the challenge that we're posing to our students that is typically open-ended? Sustained inquiry. Is this engaging for them for long periods of time? Is it authentic to themselves, to their community, to their student body? What level of authenticity do they have? Is it authentic to them? Is there an element of voice and choice where they can choose how to approach the project? And do we have time to reflect, to encourage and critique, revise, and ultimately showcase this so that they see that the entire process had some purpose and meaning behind it? These are really, really the core to the project-based learning design elements. So as we approach the end of our training, I just wanted to kind of give you a short focus activity in the next slide or the next page, where we're just going to take about 5 to 10 minutes to redesign an existing assignment that you have in your own course. And I give you this 8 essential project design element checklist online in the link below, but I also give you a form, a Google form, where you can fill it out and enter it in one by one. So you have one for yourself to keep, to print out, and of course we'll do it online as an activity. But make sure to address how your project will meet each criteria, and just take a moment to see how you can redesign an assignment. Again, the checklist is online for you to keep. This is the Essential Project Design Elements checklist. And when you want to redesign an element or redesign a project, use this as a guide. Ultimately, this has helped me, and this just kind of keeps me focused on what matters most in designing my project. And I like to share this with you so that you can use it for your own future projects as well.